Let's examine INEOS a little bit here, because the 1958 supporters group have not exactly been backward in coming forwards in what they've had to say about INEOS in the recent days. Just to quote you some lines, this is what they said and their spokesman said in the last few days. They said United has become a toxic partnership between the INEOS billionaire and the Glazers. The director of football, Jason Wilcox, and the chief executive, Omar Barada, were learning on the job, they said, and should go. And they say this: after lurching from one disaster to another, Ratcliffe comes across as an incompetent clown turning the club into a circus. Is there an argument, Merson, that since INEOS came in, United as a whole have gone backwards?
Yeah, I would probably say so. I mean, to call a man a clown who's a multi-billionaire is a bit strong, in my opinion.
But they're looking at what he's done to United.
Yeah.
They're worried about what he's done elsewhere.
Yeah, I think what's happened, he's come in and thought with the jobs he's done at other businesses, he can go and do that at Man United. First of all, he got behind the 8 ball, sacking people from behind the ground who are on, not a lot of money, that are not going to really affect, and then pack lunches or whatever, and still giving players free 350 grand a week who are not playing. I think he got all that wrong. Yeah, I just think, and he brought the man in, the cycler.
Dave Brailsford.
Yeah,
cycling man, as he used to refer to him as.
Sir Dave. Please.
Yeah, Sir David. Yeah, but he's a cycling man. It's like, it's like me going in somewhere after I finish playing and go, do us a favour, you come into Surrey Cricket Club and try
or do some paddle training.
Try and win us the championship, win us the county championship. You know what I mean? Like to say, oh, you've done really well at football.
Well, it's like Sir Clive Woodward at Southampton.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It doesn't work. So, yeah, I understand Man United and I understand their fans, and he probably, if he could do it all over again, like there's a lot of things in life, everybody around the world, if you could do it again, you'd probably change it differently. But at the same time, this is not last year and 2 years and 3 years. We're talking 20 years now, Man United. It's not like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's constant. We still live in this thing of Man United, of like a Ronaldo at his pomp, and Roy Keane and Rio Ferdinand and Vidic and Paul Scholes
and Rooney
and Chelsea's and Rooney, and that gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. A long time gone. Start now and just try and get back to a little bit. They think now, because it's Man United, they're going to just fly up and win the Premier League. It's got to be done slowly, but they've got to get things right. Can't keep on sacking managers. But they knew this manager played free at the back. And I sat on here a long time ago and said, Chelsea suited Amorim better than Man United did. So they knew when he come that he played free at the back.
And they must have looked rigid to that as well.
Yeah, and they must have known at the time that they didn't have the players to free at the back. So then you go, we don't take you. So for me, there's a lot to be done, but I think there's a lot of people still living in that 20-odd years ago time of Man United, and that's long gone.
Just talking more about INEOS, Sue, because one of their strap lines in terms of a business is the best in class when it comes to decision-making. Well, let's examine some of their decisions then. We mentioned already, Erik ten Hag gets that FA Cup win. There were all kinds of reports ahead of that game that he was going to face the sack. They kept him on, gave him a shed load of money to spend in the summer. Then he goes. They bring in Dan Ashworth. He goes. And now bring in Ruben Amorim. They chased him down hard. They prized him away from Sporting Lisbon. He didn't want to go at that stage of the season. And now he's gone as well. It just feels, decision-making-wise, they're a long way from the best in class. Do you trust them to make the right decision long-term going forward now for United?
Well, at the moment, you'd have to say no, wouldn't you? And I think a lot of fans are feeling that as well. Will they make the right decision? Because when you look back at all of the decisions that they've made, or a lot of the decisions that they've made, it hasn't been a success. It hasn't worked. You asked before, who's to blame? You've got to say it's collective, isn't it? Of course, the manager's got to take some of the blame, some of his decisions, his tactics and things like that. But when you look at the bigger picture, since, INEOS, Sir Jim Ratcliffe have come in, a lot of the decisions and a lot of the things that he's done has been criticised, and rightly so. That the Ten Hag thing, it looked like he was going to go, didn't it? Like you said, it looked like they were interviewing other managers, or the managers were going to come in. Then they decided to back him. Then they decided to give him loads of money where he brought in players. And then they decided to sack him. So it just seemed like a real sort of waste of money. Obviously, a similar sort of things happened with Amorim, and I know he came out and said things. I don't think they expected to sack him so soon. So at this moment in time, you've got to say you would question the decision and if the decision was right. And you just feel that this next decision has to be right. So the interim manager has to be right, because I think you've got to try and get Manchester United into a good position, whether that's Champions League, whether that's European football, because the manager that potentially could come in the summer, he's then going to want to get the best players, and the best players will only come if they're playing Champions League football. So they have to get it right now. They've then got to get it right in the summer, because there's been so many decisions in the past and previous that we've gone, I'm not sure about that.
And he's also, whoever it is who comes indoors, particularly long-term, come the summer, they're going to have to deal with that dynamic that Amorim struggled with in terms of Jason Wilcox. Now, we know as a player, decent. You know, he won the Premier League with Blackburn. There are question marks over him, though, in terms of his role at Manchester United. I mean, there was a Q&A he did at Old Trafford. They didn't know it was being filmed. It ended up being filmed, and it was released to the wider public. But he spoke quite honestly in that interview, saying, I'm a coach at heart. I am a coach inside, even though I have a different job now. That's a strength of my role, but it causes me a bit of a problem because I always want to interfere, he said, in what managers are doing. It's quite clear he was interfering in terms of what Ruben Amorim was doing. So long term, if that dynamic remains the same, he's very close with the CEO, Omar Barada, as well. How does that play out going forward when you've got a frustrated coach with a very big say?
Yeah, well, I think this boils down to a lot of sporting directors that sometimes aren't accountable for the decisions they make, bringing players in. And unfortunately, in this day and age, coaches are. They stand on the touchline and they're there. They're the ones who are getting all the heat from the fans, from the media. And ultimately, Jason Wilcox there is the man who's bringing the players in. And this isn't a Manchester United. This is across the board. And I know this at lower league as well, by the way, that happens. So a manager or a coach signs up to what he's dealt. And that's where the breakdown happened last week with Ruben Amorim, where he came out and said, I don't want to be a coach. I want to be manager of Manchester United.
I want the final say.
I want the final say in the players that comes in and the recruitment. But I think we see it in Germany where sporting directors are accountable. They come out and say, why did you sign that player? What did you see in that? Because they don't all
Well, they go in front of the media, don't they?
Yeah, I've seen it at some of my old clubs that this happens. And when it gets wrong, sporting directors maybe get moved on, or maybe aren't accountable for their actions, and that's signing players. And it's the managers that we always speak about. But recruitment at many clubs in the Premier League hasn't been good enough, and it hasn't at Manchester United. And the proof is in the pudding, where we say Merson touches on some of those Manchester United legends. I mean, there isn't too many in this Manchester United team that get anywhere near the era of me growing up. Bruno Fernandes is a top player. I like Cunha that's been brought in. I like Mbeumo that's been brought in. And ultimately, the manager has to coach and get the best out of these players. Ruben Amorim wasn't doing that, but I think the hierarchy at Manchester United have to take an awful lot of responsibility of this as well. And the next question is, who's going to be the right manager? It's the $1 million question, isn't it? So sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. And I don't put all that on these, because people will go, you touched on the food and losing jobs. That's unacceptable. That's pathetic. That's really bad management from the top. Trying to get the right manager doesn't always guarantee that it's going to be right. But what they will be trying to do is what they think is the best for the football club.
Do you trust them, INEOS, to get it right going forward?
Well, the proof's in the pudding that it hasn't been right so far. But while they're in charge, they make the decisions and they are trying to get it right. But I think the summer is a big factor, where they're waiting for a manager that is charged of maybe a national team, maybe a club, a manager in a club in this country. They're waiting till they're out of work, in my opinion.
And the thing is, Merce, it's no coincidence. You look at the teams at the top of the Premier League at the moment: Arsenal, Aston Villa, Manchester City. There are sporting directors of that club, but the three guys in charge, Arteta, Emery and Guardiola, they are boss. They're in charge. They call the shots. And no coincidence, they're sitting top of the pile. So whoever comes in the summer long term, that dynamic has to be surely on their terms.
Yeah, and the problem with that, when Sir Alex Ferguson was at the top of the game, and Man Utd were running the show, they were running English football, they were phenomenal. People forget he had unbelievable coaches. And he kept on changing his coaches. Do you know what I mean? It'd be a couple of years or 3 years, they'd change the coach. It was a different voice. Even though you had the manager, all we do here in this country is you just sack the manager. Sometimes players get fed up with the same voice time and time again. You know, when you're a manager of a club, you want someone like a Roy Keane who comes in and has a go at players, so you don't have to have a go at them first. Do you know what I mean? Even when I was at Arsenal with Tony Adams, he'd come in and start having a go at players. If George keeps on doing it, George Graham, and then you start thinking, oh, he's getting on my... You know, everybody forgets Sir Alex Ferguson was an unbelievable manager. He had unbelievable coaches. And even when they were successful, they still moved on and had another coach, because players get fed up with the same voice week in, week out. And that's not the case now. All we seem to do now is go, right, sack the manager and we'll start again. You know, instead of, you know, look at Pep. Pep's gone and got another coaches, another ideas. And it's just different. You know, this man, they need to get this sorted, Man United, because they're drifting further and further. And I said before, around the world it works, right, where teams like in Africa and Australia and New Zealand and China and Japan, when they're growing up as little kids, they all want to support the winning team. And whoever that winning team is, they will support that team. And that's why Man United have become the biggest club in the world, because you go to all these countries and everybody supports Man United around a certain age. These young kids now won't be supporting. They'll be supporting teams like Man City and Arsenal, teams that are winning, that, you know, are at the top of the game at the moment. And that's how you get supporters on your side. And it's a cycle, and they need to sort this out, because at the moment, biggest club in the world, or one of them, far, far from the biggest team in the world.
Eddie Howe has limited options at centre-back after Fabian Schär joined Dan Burn in the treatment room. Schär's ankle injury isn't as bad as first feared, but it may affect Howe's actions in the transfer window.
No break. We think it's just ligament damage. Be seeing a specialist in the next few days to get sort of definitive answers, but maybe more positive than the initial assessment.
Does Fabian's injury change anything in regards to what you're planning to do, what you could do this month in the transfer window?
First of all, we have to get the definitive assessment on the scale of the injury and the time that he's going to be out. At the moment, we're confident Fabian will be back before the end of the season. That's sort of what the guidelines we've been given. But let's see. Then let's see with Dan and other options that we have internally before looking externally.
Joining us now is Newcastle United fan Chris Curry. OK, Chris, we'll ask you about Howe's future in a moment, but first, transfers. Do you need a defender? What else do you need?
Yeah, afternoon, guys. Or morning, sorry. I think we do need a defender, definitely. The centre-half, we used to be quite strong in that position. We had quite a lot of depth. Certainly when we were signing Malik Chow, you had Chow, Botman, Schär, Burn. And then I think, obviously, the amount of football we've played, the fatigue, the injuries that have been concerned, that we are really light there now. We haven't really got any academy players to come in to play there. Lewis Smiley filled in there. He seems to be able to play anywhere, that young man, to be fair. But we definitely do need a centre-half and probably some full-back cover. I think the perfect solution would be a player who can maybe do both, possibly like a Nathan Ake maybe, but Man City have got defensive problems too. So I think we are in a bit of a situation there. So yeah, 100% for me, guys, we need a defensive cover, because we have got injury-prone players there too, no matter how good they are, Sven Botman, Tino Livramento, and we can't run the risk of any more injuries at the back, really.
Yeah. Chris, he's been a great signing for you, Fabian Schär, but I always feel when he goes down, and it's quite often, I always feel like sometimes he gets carried off, and I hope he's not too bad, obviously, but he seems to play the next game, so I wouldn't read too much into Fabian Schär going down injured, because he does it so often.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a running joke. The Fabian Schär head injury, I think, is kind of routine in most Newcastle games now, whether you believe it's dark arts or whatever. But, I mean, that was a bad one, unfortunately, that he had the night against Leeds. And I don't think there was any malice by Calvert-Lewin. It was just two players fighting for the ball. And it's a real shame that he fell that way, because I thought he had a great game, some great tackles, and he was looking at his best. And you're right, Tim, 3 million quid he cost us. And, you know, that's one hell of a signing, really, in terms of what he's done, 250 appearances. But I think the issue is maybe, and it's maybe a little bit of a criticism, is that we've maybe relied on these players who came to us kind of in their 30s, and because they've been so good, we've maybe been a little bit complacent, not look to look at the kind of contingency plan for those players, like we've done at full-back with Livramento and Hall, you know, and obviously with Botman's injuries, that's been a real blow for us too, because the older guys have maybe played too much football, and it's possibly now, you know, fatigued them a little bit, where injuries are coming quite regularly.
Right, Eddie Howe, how concerned are you about his future? Manchester United, by the way, there's no talk that Manchester United are in for him. This is just Roy Keane. It would be his first choice. A lot of Manchester United fans are getting in touch with us saying that he would be their first choice as well. And all season, we've been talking about England in the summer. Do you think you've got him long term?
Well, I'm not sure if I've got him long term, but I'm certainly not concerned about him going to Manchester United. I think by my count, including interim managers, I think Manchester United have had 5 managers since Eddie Howe has been at Newcastle. He's a manager who wants stability, he wants control. He actually wants to maybe be a little bit more like a throwback manager to a Ferguson or a Wenger. That's the reason where there's maybe been a little bit of friction between sporting directors and Eddie Howe over the last couple of years, because he wants to be involved in scouting and player development, academy development. And at Manchester United, it just seems to be a real toxic place now, whether you're an experienced manager with trophies in your cabinet in the shape of Van Gaal or Mourinho, whether you're a young manager coming through in the shape of Amorim, that job seems to chew you up and spit you out. And I think Manchester United still live in this kind of mindset that they're the Manchester United that I sadly grew up hating, winning everything, and they're not that team anymore. They're miles away from that, but they're ex-players like Roy Keane and alike, and brilliant players with unbelievable pedigree in the game. They still sometimes forget that Manchester United have slipped down that pecking order in terms of appeal. If Eddie Howe was going to leave Newcastle for another club, if it would maybe be, I don't know, a Chelsea or an Arsenal or even a club abroad. But I think England is probably the one that would concern me about Howe, because I think he's tailor-made for the England job. And I think it's the kind of manager that probably the FA would like, depending on what happens with Thomas Tuchel in the World Cup potentially. But concerned, I think the issue is that the life of a manager is short-term. I think Eddie Howe has probably served longer than most managers, which is a real sad indictment of the state of modern day management. But I think I'd be more worried about him going to England than I would Manchester United, because I just think they are absolutely miles off it. And whoever goes in there next will probably get chewed up and spat out a year later.
How do the club match Eddie Howe's ambitions? He does seem an ambitious manager.
Yeah, he is an ambitious manager. I mean, I think they're always going to struggle with the PSR and the FFP regulations until we get to that point where the commercial revenue is enhanced. The stadium's obviously a huge kind of white elephant in the room for us, because we've got the fans wanting to attend. We've got the ground at full capacity. We can't sell any more tickets. You've got the corporate kind of sponsorship there too. And whether people like it or not, that's a modern day requirement of being one of those clubs. You have to have that money coming in to add to the revenue, and then that can give Eddie Howe more money in the transfer market to play with. But the club have backed him quite well. I mean, he had over 200 million in the summer. Granted, he lost arguably his best player, and that was maybe a little bit mismanaged behind the scenes as well. But I don't blame Eddie Howe for that one. I think he was kind of, if anything, he came out of that looking an even better manager, because that was a really difficult situation to handle as a manager, which makes him appeal to a lot of people like Roy Keane, I suppose. But they just got to keep backing him in the transfer market as best they can within the financial restraints that they're operating under, I think.
OK, Chris, thank you.
Paul Merson delivers his trademark passionate verdict on Manchester United's manager crisis. Should Zinedine Zidane be hired immediately? Is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer the perfect head coach fit? Can INEOS be trusted to reignite the Red Devils after Amorim's sacking? Watch Merson's full breakdown of each candidate's strengths, weaknesses, tactical fit at Old Trafford, and how they'd impact United's Premier League survival fight. Plus exclusive analysis on INEOS, transfer strategy, January window plans, and whether United fans can trust Ratcliffe's vision. Get Sky Sports-style punditry, fan reactions, and Merson's bold predictions for Man Utd's future.